Okay, everyone. So this is the start time for this session on the Cities Activity Database. I will wait just a minute or two to see if there are any others looking to enter, and then we'll just move on. So we will be looking at the chats during the session as well, just like to let everyone know. And so if you do have any commentary, there may be some things that you're interested in looking into a bit further. This session has a number of interactive components, so there will be opportunities to sort of contribute or to voice your opinions about things, but definitely feel free to bring up any issues or ideas that you have during the session as well. And we will be just monitoring the chat and we can bring that in. If it's suitable. So I'll just wait maybe one more minute before proceeding. So. All right, we might get into it and let people join as and when they would like to. So I hope you've had an interesting conference thus far. I'm sure you've been able to attend a number of really fascinating discussions. This particular one is we're looking at a particular platform that we call the Cities Activities Database. And it is a tool that allows cities to be able to communicate more effectively about the activities they're doing and to be able to interact a bit more in a more streamlined manner and with a little bit more insight to other stakeholders in the field to work nationally and internationally. So it should be a really interesting platform to explore. In our conversations today, one of the things we're really hoping to dig into is what does contemporary practice look like for council staff and for practitioners in the sustainability and the carbon emissions mitigation environment, really trying to dig into where your what sort of decisions you make, what sort of pressure points that you have, where you get your information from, and try to sort of understand where there are opportunities to get improved knowledge pathways and knowledge transfer. So we have a really nice group of speakers today. They cover a range of areas that intersect with knowledge acquisition and knowledge sharing between cities. I will step through them individually. But before we go any further, I would just like to make an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the elders that are here today, if any, to acknowledge that. So I'm in Tasmania, and so I acknowledge those who have passed before us, and to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people who are attending the event, and for any Indigenous or First Nations people from the areas that you're from. So just so stepping further into the session. So what we are looking to do in particular for this session's focus in particular is to try and work on developing better systems of peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. Now, this may sound a little dry, but there's actually a lot of great ways that this could be useful to you as practitioners. You already do a lot of peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. And this is really trying to understand if there's ways to improve how that happens, to increase the number of cities that you can engage with, to increase the quality and effectiveness of the knowledge transfer that exists, and potentially to look at ways in which that knowledge transfer and that experience and that capacity can move to other stakeholders outside of the local government sector. So I think it should be clear that to proceed from this, we need to better understand council staff. So you as practitioners play an absolutely pivotal role in determining what sort of strategies are being deployed, the types of activities that cities are doing to mitigate emissions, both within council owned assets, but also importantly within the communities. As we move into the as we approach so the ramp up to 2030, developing and implementing effective interventions that mitigate emissions at the municipality level, at the city level, will become increasingly important. So understanding how you interact with that, how you make decisions about the strategies you pursue, this becomes really important. So to do this, we look at models or ideas about what this job involves, what the jobs in this sector involve, and what sort of pressures you might have where you source your information from. So we have like sort of a nominal example we talk to. We know it's a very diverse sector and there's a lot of differences in practices, but to try and figure out where's the best place to create improved solutions and improved opportunities for knowledge transfer and incremental knowledge acquisition, we're sort of distilling out a few key elements of what these jobs sort of entail. So start with, a core and central premise is the delivery of programs, and so delivery of carbon emissions mitigation programs. And we know that there are a range of stakeholders that are very interested in, that seek to influence, and also are directly affected by these programs. That can be both internal and external to council. So we know that accountability and inclusion of community and community members, the diverse stakeholders that it includes, that's a really important aspect. Councillors, senior executive, these are all critical stakeholders. We understand that networking with peers for insight, so other city practitioners, other staff across, within your region, within your state, across the country, this is one of the key ways in which, new knowledge or new insight is gained in the sector. And we also see an increasing trend of where expectations are increasing about what programs will do, how effective they will be at reducing and mitigating emissions, and also really starting to coherently tie together the actions of cities and councils to emissions mitigation targets, and understanding what the relationship is between these activities and the sort of the required targets as outlined by carbon budgets, science-derived targets, and that kind of thing. So we sort of see these stresses, these pressures. That always catches me. But so we're going like, and then so in that environment, we're really interested in exploring what barriers, if any, there are for you to, for you to feel like you're making effective decisions, for you to feel confident about the outcomes. So we're talking through, do you have difficulty or challenges in connecting through to the municipal emissions? Like, do you feel like you're in a situation of where you understand the relationship and you're confident about when you're selecting or choosing between different activities that you're aware of, like how that could potentially affect your emissions, the municipal emissions, both now and into the future? Understanding what other initiatives might apply to your municipality, that seems to us to be a potential barrier. Like, so if you're looking at activities being pursued by cities elsewhere, understanding if it applies to you, if it's useful for you to know, and if you can draw any valuable numbers or insights out of that. And also another barrier potentially is being able to access and liaise with the research community. Like, from our work, we see that there are a number of barriers. These are pretty systemic barriers. So they're just differences in the way the research community works, in how local government and city practitioners, how they make decisions, how they access information. And so fortunately, we're going to have Paris Hadfield from I4C to be able to talk to that a little bit. And so we're just seeing, so we're sort of seeing these kind of barriers. When we look at solutions and we start to explore what sort of tools would be useful, what sort of insights might be useful, we are basing it on these kind of understandings. And so it's actually really important that this is ground truth in some way. So there's some sort of, so that we make sure that we're not just inventing the roles, responsibilities, and objectives of council staff, that it's actually really connected to them. So to assist with that right now, I would just like to step into a survey. So this survey you can access through here. I believe it's also shared in the chat. So, hey Brad, good to see you. So it's also available in the chat. If you guys can, if you would like to step in to this Menti survey, and this first survey is really asking about if you're in a position, or if you're currently in a place where you're assisting with the creation of a emissions mitigation strategy or a climate strategy, where do you look to, or what pressures are you under, or what sort of influencing factors come to bear from your experience that really shape how you decide about what to do, what's included in that strategy and the like. So you should see this screen. You should see a screen pop up where that's the Menti screen, the code, so the website and the code is there for you to view. So it will give you a couple of minutes to do the response, but I won't actually dig into the response straight away. So we'll pop it up there, but give you a couple of minutes to respond. But then we'll actually be reviewing the applicant survey after we have the opportunity to look at a couple of the application areas. So I'll just give you a pause for a couple of minutes, and please, if you can, just note down anything that you feel is relevant. I would also highlight the other category is quite important. If you're feeling like this doesn't really capture where you're at or how you would approach this problem, please just indicate that in the other category, because it's I don't want to corral you into a range of responses. If you feel like they don't fit, then please let us know. So, okay. This is really good. Okay, well, so we are getting a number of responses. So you can still comment for a little bit longer. But what I'm going to do is to pass through. We have a second survey as well. This one is just a bit more open. So what we're doing here is we're asking for you to sort of really step in and speculate about the types of decisions that you're presented. So this is outside of just the decision making around selecting particular interventions for the development of a strategy, so that formal strategy development process, and more about how you approach knowledge and sort of seek information or seek ways of better understanding the problem that sort of come up in a more day-to-day type situation. So this is a second survey. This one's really open, so you can sort of respond however you will. We do have some prompts for where to respond or what to respond to. So in those prompts, so we've identified just 3 scenarios. As you might imagine, there would be like many possible scenarios, but we're saying here as these prompts, one example, a local community group is really advocating for a certain action. So they're very charged about it. You all know local community groups, there is a lot of energy there. And so they're coming to you with a certain action that they want you to pursue. How would you go about determining or responding to that, or like say making a deliberation on if this is a good action, if this is something that you that you would advocate to pursue, something that you would seek to include in your program, or something you would say like, actually this probably looks like a low priority. The second one here is, how do I convince senior staff and council of the worth of initiative? So this is a scenario where you've kind of made a determination that this initiative is valuable and is worth pursuing, but you're looking for resources or information or some sort of communication piece that helps sway council staff. So you're communicating typically with a lower climate literacy individual, elements that you think would be powerful or persuasive. And then the third one here is more of a general evaluation question. So it's saying, I've got a budget for mitigation emissions, so I do have money, but I'm in the position of where I need to kind of evaluate or decide between a couple, and just asking like, what would you look to in that instance? Like, what sort of things would you consider important? How would you source information to make a deliberation if you had a couple of options in front of you? So this one's a little bit more open. I'll give you a couple extra minutes to respond here. But it's like, again, just there's no wrong answers to this. It's really just an opportunity for us to get a feel from your perspective as council staff making decisions in this area. What are the influential factors that you take into account? So we are getting some responses pop up, which is terrific. So I'll give you a few more minutes to respond to that. Well, not a few more minutes, a couple of minutes. It's tight. You respond now. There will be, as I've indicated, we're going to be moving into the next section, which Portia Odell from Cities Power Partnership will be speaking to. And we're going to be looking at exploring some of the functionality that a data set like CAD can provide. So like some of the new ways of approaching problems, some of the ways it might overcome some barriers or hassles. And so there will be this opportunity, this further opportunity to explore what some of these components are. But I will, again, we're gonna go through the results of this after we've had that opportunity of doing that sort of discussion, that application-based discussion. But right now, what I'll do is I'm going to step into a little bit more of a deep discussion about Cities Activity Database and what it is. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it or just starting to wonder about what we're talking about, I will go through in a little bit more detail. So, what is it? To answer that question, I'll start about how we arrived at it. So we as consultants in this field and working with a range of different stakeholders, we see that cities have been taking action for decades in carbon emissions mitigation, lot of community scale initiatives that have been pursued, and there's a very ever increasing amount of activity in this area. But we actually really still don't know what is effective. So we're not coming from a place of where there's a really robust insight into the relative effectiveness of measures and the potential scale of impact that city level initiatives can take. So, which is an interesting situation to be in. We have been working on this a while. So we've been looking at trying to better understand why that might be the case. And so there are a range of factors, and this is a very complex problem, and there is going to be no silver bullet. But we find that one of the central issues that needs to be considered is that we have a lot of difficulties doing apples for apples type comparisons. So just understanding that certain initiatives, certain activities that are being pursued by cities are equal to and the same as activities in other cities. Now, what this does, this creates an environment of where most of the learnings happen in a sort of like a case study, an anecdote, and a direct conversation. So that means if you're speaking directly to a city and you're looking at the activities they're doing, you can exchange knowledge that way. But the ability to learn across larger regions, across regional networks, national networks, international networks, is very, very heavily compromised because the ability to transfer knowledge and to be able to aggregate and analyze activities is really, really poor. So there has been multiple attempts to try to develop solutions that address this or overcome this. But they have mixed success, and a lot of that hinges around the fact that the categorizations are not really up to the task of empowering cities to take action and to develop insight. So we really wanted to create a situation of where the main beneficiary of value are city practitioners, council staff themselves, so that they become more empowered to be able to take better decisions because they're the ones that are really creating the impact. And there's a lot of knock-on and ancillary benefits as well, as we'll go through. So like the ability for regional networks and coordinators to be able to provide better and more targeted insight to their cities and their networks, and for researchers to be able to better engage. But fundamentally, that's the key thing, the key premise. So the Cities Activity Database itself, its core value is in a categorization system that allows for tailored solutions to be understood from the perspective of individual cities. So the way that manifests, so we're still building the interface, and this conversation is part of the building of that. So we're looking at what sort of questions you would ask, and how might the results be presented. But fundamentally, at its core, it's a data set that allows for insight into city activities in a range of different ways, a range of different parameters. So you could, for instance, look at things like how popular they are, how trending they are. Are they becoming increasingly popular? Are they popular to specific regions? You can look at effectiveness, like total impact, total relative costs, total cost effect or average cost effectiveness, range of cost effectiveness. These sort of metrics start to come into play, which could present really powerful tools for deciding about scale of budget and for prioritizing certain initiatives. You can also do targeted sector investigations. So you can say, like, we really want to focus on our agricultural sector or our industrial sector or our household transport emissions or things like that. it also gives lots and lots of tools to assist with program design because of the way it breaks out components and the sort of splits out and analyzes or provides the capacity for analysis of the parts of this equation that cities can affect directly. It gives a lot of data and information about how cities should approach designing their solutions. So saying this should be an education-based initiative, or this should be a facilitation one, or and being able to better connect to information sources that are most relevant to you for the outcomes you're looking for. And also, it's actually going to be a really terrific tool for resource sharing. So because of the way that it allows for very rapid moving between a large number of initiatives, sharing of resources will become a lot easier. So to get to the point where we are now, we've had the fortune of working with some really, really excellent collaborators. And so this, we are going to speak a little bit to Innovate for Cities and their involvement directly. They will be covering a section separately, so we can go a little more in depth. But in general, sort of as an overarching description, the idea of this originated with conversations between Ironbark and Innovate for Cities back in 2019, 2020. And we was kind of looking at overcoming issues for knowledge transfer between the research community and cities. And so to be able to facilitate that, we looked at ways of quickly and effectively and in a systematized way drawing knowledge out of city strategies for the purposes of analysis. This led to a project between Ironbark and I4C that was sort of investigating standardized ways of investigating and aggregating these kind of insights. So that has led to a really terrific report, which I would strongly encourage you to take a look at, which was the Regional Research Innovation for Climate Action, which Paris put together, and she'll fortunately be in a position to comment briefly on it. And then, but also out of that, what we were seeing was that this, one of the primary value propositions here was creating a platform that was primarily focused at city practitioners, at council staff. And so, like we were saying, like with some adjustments to the way this is, the database was designed, and with sort of expanding to take into account additional considerations that cities would be directly interested in, we adapted the data set and launched on another project with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And in that, we did a more sort of robust build of the data set, focusing on the ability to ask it questions dynamically in response to specific cities or regions. And that then led to an initial population of that database with 61 cities and about 2,200 interventions. Since then, we've been continuing to iterate the design and expand its functionality and build the capacity to ask questions and sort of make dynamic responses. We've been working with Cities Power Partnership in talking about functionality. The current data set is up over 13,000 entries and over 900 cities included in it. We've done that through integration with the CDP data sets and the like. So it is actually currently sitting on the largest data set of activities globally, I believe. But more importantly, the capacity for it to be dynamically interacted with. Like a lot of these other larger data sets are very hard to draw information out of, and that is very much a priority for us to be able to do. So we will be handing over to the activity, to the whiteboarding session, to Portia, and to run through some of the applications. But I will just note that this platform allows us to draw a lot of connections that previously have been hard to do or just not possible to do. So most importantly, as I noted, the ability to connect activities together, so to be able to group them together and to look at them as coherent areas of implementation for the purpose of investigation analysis. This should, and we'll go through some of these scenarios, and this is a primary aspect of this presentation, is the ability to connect between cities really, really cleanly, really effectively, and very targeted on the specific programs and strategies that cities are doing. We're very excited about the potential for more streamlined interconnection with state level and even federal level governments, and we'll be talking through how that could work and what sort of ways it makes it possible. And then additionally, and this will be some of the more speculative stuff we'll talk towards the end of the session, but much more robust and coherent interaction with community and community groups, and being able to sort of really effectively and link together community-led initiatives to council-led initiatives and being able to sort of collaborate quite powerfully. Connecting to the research community is where this originated, and it's a very, very core value proposition we see. Like there is so much value that the research community can provide to cities, and making that happen more effectively, more cleanly and more robustly is an absolutely going to be, I think, a terrific value proposition going forward. And yes, and connecting to the world. So like this is developed very much with the mindset of what is achievable globally, like what's best practice globally, and it already incorporates a very large number of activities from the global stage. And by standardizing things such as emissions inventorying and analysis and analytical methods around activities, we're going to be able to get much more powerful, coherent interconnections to the global community. So just saying, we are looking to empower cities primarily. This is very, very much a core element of what we're trying to do. And so giving cities the tools they need to be able to make better decisions, or decisions they're more confident about, and to more dynamically keep track of what's going on in the community sector. These are all key elements. So with that, I will hand over to Portia Odell from the Cities Power Partnership. I will give a very brief introduction, and I apologize if it doesn't quite represent her excellent contributions to the sector so far. But so she has been a really proactive and enthusiastic partner with what we've been doing so far. It's been so terrific to work with her. The Cities Power Partnership is the most significant program running in Australia today for this collective action and this capacity to sort of learn together and to sort of build our knowledge networks and our sharing and capacity building networks. So we're very, very excited about it. And we are hoping that this will enable CPP to be able to do some really new and exciting things. But I'll hand over to Portia to take that away. So I will stop sharing, and hopefully Portia can start sharing.
Thanks so much, Matt. I'm just going to share my screen now. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. It looks like it's still loading. Great. Can everyone see that? Perfect. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Matt, for the introduction and for that overview of the Cities Activities Database. My name is Portia Odell. I'm Director of the Cities Power Partnership, and what I'll be talking about today is I'll give a bit of an overview of who we are and why we're particularly interested in the Cities Activities Database, and then we'll move into a bit of an overview of what we see as being the key applications or some options for what the Cities Activities Database can do for collaboration. So, I'll get my presentation going. So the Cities Power Partnership is Australia's largest network of local councils working towards zero emissions. We have 155 council members across the country, which represents 60% of Australians, which is pretty fantastic. We have councils from all across the country, all the way through from the smallest council in Australia, all the way through to the biggest council. So we have a wide diversity of types of councils of varying levels of budgets, expertise, and all on different stages of their emissions reduction journey. What we try and do, and a key aspect of our work, is giving local governments the tools, connections, and momentum to really capitalize on this global shift to a clean economy that's already happening. And we do this in a number of ways. One of the benefits for us is being part of the Climate Council, which is Australia's leading climate change communications organization. So what the Climate Council does really well is to raise the profile of everyday Australians to speak out about climate change, and also raising the profile of climate experts and providing trusted climate science to the public. And Climate Council has done some tremendous work in releasing over 120, I believe it's 130 reports now, as well as reaching 80 to 90 million people per quarter. And what that means to the Cities Power Partnership is that we have firsthand access to trusted climate experts, but also the leading science and strategies around climate change communication, which I'll get to in a second. The way we work as a program is we focus on four key areas, and I won't go too deeply into these because I want to get to the exciting CAD applications. But basically, when councils join, they have to select 5 pledges. The program has been designed to be low barrier to entry. So councils at any stage of their journey can find pledges that can work for them. They have 6 months to select those pledges, and every year we ask them to report on the progress of those pledges. We also focus really heavily on media training, joint statements, and profiling. So as I mentioned, we're being an initiative of the Climate Council. We have the benefit of being able to amplify the voices of local governments in Australia. And that's a key pillar of what we do and what the offer that we provide for councils. The media training involves getting elected officials and training them on how to speak about climate change to the media, but also to their community. And another key focus, and this is where the link is very strong for us in terms of the city's activities database, is we really focus on collaboration. We want to make sure that councils who are doing initiatives across the country are speaking to each other, aren't recreating the wheel, are learning from the successes and failures of other councils across the country. And so every aspect of what we do in terms of our events and collaboration opportunities really focuses on this aspect of collaboration. And in addition to that, we provide a number of resources to help councils advance their climate actions. But what I wanted to focus in on in particular is that the number one reason councils join the Cities Power Partnership is because they want to share and learn from other councils on emissions reduction. So that's, to us, is a really strong, as I mentioned, theme of everything that we do. And the second reason they join is because they want to access experts. They want that data, they want that expertise, and they want to do more in emissions reduction. So it's very clear to us why councils have joined the program and what it is they're looking for. And this is where the city's activities database and working with our Cities Lab at University of Melbourne has been so important for us. So the city's activities database, as Matt outlined, and how it works, we're looking to see how we can run a pilot program for councils that have just joined the Cities Power Partnership and see how we can use that information to help them guide the selection of their pledges and to make informed decisions about the emission reduction initiatives they want to do. So this is going to be just one of the many steps that we take to explore the functionality and the application of this database. And we're very excited about it because there's a lot beyond just allowing you to select what kind of initiatives that you want to do based on the data. There's a suite of other things that we think that the city's activities database can do, which is very exciting. So as Matt started to touch on, there's a lot of opportunities we see this database in terms of connecting cities. So one is this peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. So as I mentioned before, that's a really key pillar of what councils are looking for, at least from our experience in them joining the program. And I suppose one example of how this could look with the city's activities database is, say, if a council is interested in energy efficiency initiatives, they could, one, sign up to receive notifications about when other councils are undertaking this initiative, whether that's currently or when they've signed up to actually take initiative on energy efficiency. They can look at a dashboard and see the metrics of what kind of success factors or emissions and costs are associated with an energy efficiency initiative that councils are doing across the world. And they could potentially also see contact details and look at what councils are doing across the world and potentially connect with them. So act as a space for them to connect with other councils, have conversations. And if you looked at what that could look like, this is a great little diagram that Matt put together. Potentially it could look something like this, where if a council's interested in energy efficiency, they can log on and see a number of different metrics that they could look at to help them feel comfortable making a decision around what kind of initiative they're going to do. So they might choose to focus on education and see that that's roughly the investment ranges between 25,000 and 300,000. And it has a range of carbon impacts. So that, and from our perspective, and certainly from the Cities Power Partnership perspective, we have 155 councils that have made over 770 different pledges, and that's 770 different initiatives that they're doing. And we see that being great value and being able for councils to use data to inform what they're going to be doing next or what they're going to be doing to take the first step. And then the other aspect that we're particularly excited about, because as I mentioned, collaboration seems to be such a strong theme for the work that we do, is this facilitated collaboration piece. So say a council is interested in energy efficiency and other climate initiatives, but is also very keen to collaborate. There's a number of ways this database could help to facilitate that. So the database could be set up in a way that you can receive notifications about when other councils are looking to undertake this, who are located nearby, so to allow them to be connected within a regional area or councils in their state. It can look at if a state government implements an initiative that's particularly relevant for energy efficiency, for example. It can connect councils to that local opportunity, that state opportunity, because as we know, sometimes state opportunities and funding isn't always taken up by local government. So that can form a really strong tie there. And it could also help the council looking for these energy efficiency initiatives of what other councils are doing this initiative and taking advantage of existing funding or programs, and allow councils to understand what is being done by other cities. And so what that could look like, and again, this is another great slide that Matt put together, was that it could end up being a bulletin where you could get however, whether it's monthly bulletin that highlights these key things that you've signed up to receive information about. So it could be that, for example, that top bit is looking at transport and showing you that other councils in your area are actually doing transport initiatives, and it can give you a breakdown of what those initiatives are and where are they on the journey, how much they've spent. It could look at targets, and it could look at collaboration opportunities, what other councils have signed up and said, we're really interested in collaborating on energy efficiency, or we're really interested on collaborating for electric vehicles, and allow that opportunity for councils to hop on and connect with each other. So for us, I think it's a very perfect segue for us to provide this type of offering for councils. And we see there being such a tremendous number of applications, and it can be cut so many different ways. But these are just a few, I guess, a taster of what we could do. And we're particularly excited about it because we certainly see the value in getting councils to talk to each other and share this information, because last thing we want to do is reinvent the wheel. And we know that a lot of councils feel the same way. And I suppose just a last example is just this collaboration piece, focusing in on facilitating these potentially collaborative group projects, or whether it's just sharing knowledge between councils, getting them speaking to each other. We can look at these collaboration by region and look at how councils can communicate with each other on particular issues. So again, that's another key thing that I think would be really valuable, and another opportunity that this activities database could provide. With that, that brings me to the end of it, but I'd be very keen. I'm going to hand it back over to Matt and to jump us into the discussion section.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Portia. Yeah, it's really great. And the ability of connecting to the already extremely successful and impactful Cities Power partnership, about giving them more tools, is for us a really exciting thing to try to do. So what we'll do now is I actually will, fingers crossed, step into a session where we're going to do a little bit of a breakout. So this is, or it's not a breakout, sorry, it's a whiteboarding session. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion talking through some of these ideas. And I will bring up the session now. Where did it go? No. Ah, there it is. Great. So I'll just bring up the session. And so I will just hand over to our excellent corporate business manager. So what is your title now, Lex? I'll hand over to Lex, who can just run this little session and go through a couple of the questions. So Lex, are you happy to take over?
Matt, I'd love to take over. I don't have a title. That was fantastic though, and thank you to Portia as well. And I'm just going to talk for a little bit while everybody jumps onto Miro. Yeah, jump in. Look, if you don't know how to use Miro, jump into the chat and go, oh, I need help. And then one of our amazing 4 or 5 technical people here can just give you the rundown. But basically, this is a whiteboard, and we've got a question for you. And the first question is, what makes your job hard? What is tedious, unclear, costly, or uncertain? We've heard about the potential solutions that we can garner through the city's activities database and how we are starting to pilot it to try and look at opportunities with Cities Power Partnership, also with other councils, but we really have a chance to build this and understand what councils are saying, thinking, and where the gaps are, and we can kind of build the outcomes together. So there's a real opportunity. I know that there are people here on the call today, and I'm not looking at anyone in particular, Brad and Tracy, who have worked at councils for quite a long time and have a fair understanding. Please jump in and let us know, what is it that makes your job hard? What is tedious, unclear, and costly? So we kind of want to move on a little bit more from just, the kind of traditional barriers that councils have been writing in surveys for the last 20 years, like budget, political support, and get into them in a little bit more so we can try to understand ways that connecting with other cities around the neighbourhood and around the globe can potentially help us here. One of the things that Matt pointed out, as I'm going to give you a few minutes to jump in there and start answering them, I really liked at the start when he, there was the discussion, and I think Portia's well touched on about making sure that you're comparing with the right kind of cities and the right kind of projects. But if I reflect on the last 20 years working in this space, so I used to work at ICLEI Oceania and then have been at Ironbark and other organisations, working with councils and advising them on the things that they can do within the community to reduce emissions. Having that evidence base, I guess, is something that potentially we haven't had for a while, even if we thought we did. 15 years ago, ICLEI Oceania had funding to develop what was called an online measures database, which was basically to get 100 measures or actions or activities, if you like, and put them online so any other council could go and grab them. But really, that's just sharing the details of the project without the context or without understanding whether it's actually going to be useful for you, given the council you are, given your emissions, given your trajectory, and given your distinct demographics or whatever it might be. And the beauty of this particular database, 900 cities, I think, at the moment, and building 13,000 odd actions or activities, is that, as well as the things that Portia just put up around, connecting in with, say, an energy efficiency project or transport or targets or whatever are happening anywhere else, you also have the ability to make sure it's matched with your cohort or someone or a council that is similar to you, as opposed to just jumping on an email to your networks and saying, has anyone done a street lighting project lately? And then going on the first person that responds. So jump in and keep putting them in there as I quickly have a look. What have we got here? Obtaining accurate data internally, picking winners. How's everyone going with the Miro? Jump into the chat if you would like. Good point, Kathy, as well, has just mentioned, if you're a non-council person or city person, think about it as a community member. What's going to make it easier for you to make climate action decisions? And we'll give you a minute or two more to just think about that and write down some responses. difficulties in convincing others, barriers to understanding the effectiveness. That's an interesting one. Oh, we've got people who have moved into the opportunities. Very good. Please do jump into the opportunities as well. Things that you would like to do. Perhaps in the context of what we've just heard. Maybe as well, what would help perhaps to connect to other cities? Or are you fine with connecting to other cities? And do we need to rethink our assumptions? Are those connections sorted? Are there other things that you connect to potentially that we could build on? This could help us as well inform the sort of functionality moving forward that we have within this resource that we collectively have developed. 900 cities, 13,000 odd climate actions or activities, the ability to have peer-to-peer learning and knowledge sharing. What sort of functionality could we do with that?
Okay, starting to see a couple of trends across here. So looking at some of these things, so picking technology winners, understanding local context, trawling through many options. So these kinds of conversations, we're saying like the ability to, sort of relatively evaluate different initiatives and sort of the type of base business as usual actions that are occurring within your community and your ability as a city to interact with them. So, and this, interestingly, a lot of these comments are actually around numerical evaluation. So like sort of quantified evaluation of the measures. So understanding like how they connect to effectiveness, like in emissions mitigation, which is really cool. Like this is a tricky area. And I think like it does require like some fairly robust knowledge systems to be able to deal with. And if you're seeing this as a problem, that's good from our perspective. It means like there probably is a bit of a fit here. So one of the other groupings we're seeing here down the opportunity space is consistency. So interconnection between sort of approaches. So like connecting to state and federal, programs so consistent targets being an interesting point, going like, this is a longer term play and we need like to essentially keep the goalposts in kind of like a reliably similar place. Monitoring and evaluation is an interesting area. We're going to be touching upon that and what the possibilities are there. The connecting to industry experts to get insights and data, that is an interesting idea, like an interesting element, because one thing that is fairly true in this sector is that it has been like the voice of independent consultants is very pronounced. Like it's like quite a lot of knowledge gets funneled through consultants that have no need or like formal requirement to sort of standardize the way that they aggregate or reflect information. And this creates an environment where it's quite hard to say like what is the common truth to things. So the ability to sort of create like more centralized platform, more centralized sort of description of what's going on means that we could more effectively, more consistently bring in experts and have that voice, widely accessible. So certainly that will be one of the entry points. When we look at that researcher collaboration, that researcher integration, that is one of the primary value propositions, which is that the ability to get these real expert level insights to help shape decision making broadly for cities directly is very much something we're trying to do.
Hey Matt, I'd love to ask if it's all right. Getting back, and I'm trying to find out who it is that's putting these sticky notes up on the board. But the people that have said that the challenges and the pain points are trawling through the many options and being able to choose the most effective option. The getting objective information. It'd be great to hear from the people that have put those down, picking technology winners, the next innovation, because we kind of potentially want to move away from that. If you put that down, can you elaborate, please? What did you mean by trawling through the many options? Who was it? You can unmute yourself, you know. Who has the challenge of picking technology winners? No, we're quiet today. That's all right.
Hey, Lex.
Yeah.
Just to get clarity, I'm just because are we asking the question around what would help you connect to other cities? That what makes your job harder to connect to other cities? Or are we very much more, are we more specifically looking at the functionality potential of the city's activities database? Because I'm not sure about that particular comment, but trawling through the options is probably relevant to both. How do you connect with other cities on the actions you're wanting to take within your climate action journey? You know, trawling through the many options is probably relevant there. I'm not sure about the functionality of the city's activity database to help you. Actually, I think I saw Sombel on here. I'm not sure if she's still here, but Sombel, our colleague, has actually been looking at all of the actions that cities are taking and thinking about how you clustered those cities around the actions they're taking, rather than necessarily, you know, some city networks are cluster or pair or partner cities in a different way. But so I'm not sure if it came from there. But anyway, so the question is really, or is the a discussion, are we talking about the options of functionality of the city's activity database, or really trying to understand more about the challenges in connecting to other cities? Because that trawling option.
That's a really good question, and that's one I'll definitely pass straight to Matt.
Okay, so it's actually we're coming at this from a couple of different directions. So one is that we think that sort of systemically there are some opportunities to improve the way that knowledge transfer occurs and the way that we iteratively learn. And so we certainly, you know, having that as a function of the city's activity database and its associated features, functions, outputs is, you know, fairly central. But we also, like, what we definitely need to achieve is connecting to city practitioners, council staff, and the way that they do their jobs, the way they go about their work, and the way they create these outputs. And so it's like ensuring that value is there, that we're creating systems that work for people to do their jobs the way they understand them, the way they like to do them. This is really, really important. So when we're looking at what these issues are, or these barriers, these opportunities, we don't want to curtail the conversation to just things that seem relevant to CAD. It's more just talking about the general knowledge of environment, the general way that information is brought in. So yeah, so like there was a comment which was basically about the well, it was very specific, which was the student community having little to no influence on major change makers actually contribute to impactful climate change. So it was climate change, emissions change. So this is like a really, really fundamental and important question.
Shaya and I are on the chat at the moment, Matt. Maybe we could bring her into the conversation, them into the conversation.
Absolutely,
sorry,
yeah.
Because I've not to put you on the spot, Shreya, but actually I'm interested in the question and how it does come into this conversation, that question that Matt's asking. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself, or feel free to continue in the chat function. Oh, there you go. Great.
Hi, am I audible?
Just.
Yep. Just.
Okay. So, how am I supposed to answer and not hear the question?
Apologies, and we can't hear you very well. We might stick to the chat function discussion. Apologies for that.
Okay.
Matt, please feel free
Yeah.
to continue.
But one thing I will say to that is that the answer to that question, and sort of a more generalized answer to that question, is like, what can any particular stakeholder, what is the most effective options available for them for influencing carbon emissions and the carbon emissions trajectory, which I think we're saying is still kind of an open question. So we're not sure what the answer to that is, or we're not sure what the potential of it is. We're hoping to create an environment where we can learn the answer to that, and ideally learn it quite quickly. So, and also it would be quite dynamic. Like the whole, emissions trajectory of, Australia, of the globe, is not a trend. It is many, many trends all mixed together. And so they're trends in, population growth, economic activity, emissions intensity of commercial activity, industry types, technology iterations. All of these trends change the way we're going, change the way emissions are being made. Some of them are very, very macro policy specific, so a specific decision being made can set trends in motion. Many of them are very macro, longer term, sort of broad market shift type trends. So it's a dynamic situation, and with many factors at play. So the way that I think we look to build knowledge about what people can do is by being able to get people to talk to a common conversation, a common knowledge set, and provide as many opportunities for us to be able to investigate it from different angles.
All right. I think that little session might be done, Matt, so I might pass back to you if we're at 10 past, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So
Let's move on.
we will be
noting.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Lex, for handling that. We will be recording all of these comments, and these are really just the starts of these conversations. Like, as Portia was able to go through, there's a lot of real interest in the details of it, in what sort of ways we can make tools available, what sort of functions become possible. So it will be something we develop and evolve on. We are certainly hoping that we're creating an environment that allows for a lot more of an outcomes, a lot more of an action-based conversation, where things, we're starting to put pegs in the sand. We're starting to say well, how effective is this? How, who is trying what? How does this connect to emissions inventories and the like? So what I'll do is I will stop the sharing of this, and we'll go back to our general presentation. But yes, I hope that you all feel like you've had an opportunity to contribute, and please continue either on the board or in the chat for any new ideas you get. But what I'll do now is I will talk to the next main application that we're seeing. So beyond cities directly peer-to-peer sharing and sort of knowledge acquisition and the way that we can investigate what cities are up to, this sort of system allows for a new type, sort of a new standard, a facilitator, an easier interaction with state governments in particular, and federal governments if they felt inclined to do so. The state governments are, when we deal a lot with them, we liaise with them, and I know that state government and local governments interact a great deal already. This is, they deliver programs that are extremely applicable and useful to local governments. There's a lot of education and training capacity that happens, and there are ongoing conversations. However, there are some opportunities to improve the way these relationships work, and we think that a number of these might be assisted by this sort of common knowledge platform. So one of the main ways that could be facilitated through this interaction is the fact that local governments and state governments have trouble being clear that they're talking to the same thing, and state governments in particular have difficulty getting their head around what all the different activities that local governments are implementing. So I'll comment to your suggestions there in a second as we move on to some of the projection and monitoring evaluation options as well, Shira. So this ability for state governments to get a clearer idea of how, what activities local governments are doing, how they aggregate, where local governments are taking action, becomes a really nice way for local governments to advocate and to represent their positions more consistently to state governments, and also for state governments to now have a much more coherent and sort of action-based conversation with local governments. So we're looking at more facilitated and more effective tailoring of interventions coming from the state government for the benefit or for the collaboration with local governments, of state governments being able to more proactively notify specific local governments about when initiatives might be relevant to them, and for a more robust creation of state government, local government collaboration on interventions and the implementation of those interventions. So where, say, a state government might be providing an incentive and grants initiative, and local governments might be facilitating the uptake of those grant initiatives, we could see a lot of opportunity for that to be more succinctly and coherently designed, and for where, say, certain local governments are implementing it, for other local governments to be notified or to be their attention brought to that relationship and those combined services in a more consistent and reliable way, and certainly to encourage more knowledge sharing. And so, like resource sharing, development of assets, standardizing of the way the engagement pathways work. One thing that I think is going to be increasingly relevant for these type of programs and these program design is looking at recruitment and recruitment methods. And so we will definitely be exploring those options, and that will be a big thing that comes in the near future. Then also what we have here is the more coherent and more robust connection through to what the state governments, what the international community is doing. And so I will have to apologize, Kathy. I know you just gave me some detailed notes, but they are not coming up here for some reason. So, but I will attempt to describe Kathy and her immense contribution to this process so far. So
And I have to just do it as well if you'd like.
Oh, if you're happy to, that would be really good. It's not, sorry, this is my fault. I thought I set it up properly, but I clearly didn't. So
no, you did, and I think you spoke to it at the start. It's all good. It's all good, I think.
All right, terrific. So there are some really, really exciting opportunities for connecting to the international arena, and I'll get Kathy to speak to that now.
No, absolutely, and I can see there's other great comments coming into the chat on the side as well. But certainly, Matt, you said at the start, you mentioned the involvement of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, who I'm speaking on behalf of in this session, and it is a global network of networks and of city networks. And at the moment, I think there's 12,000 cities representing, I think it's ticked over the 1 billion people mark that the cities represent, and their commitments to emissions reduction is, I think it's about the 24 billion tonnes by 2030. So, but commitments is that key word, isn't it? There's the ambition, and it's only going to get even higher when we've got COP26 coming and cities race to zero, encouraging cities to aim higher and have even stronger targets, and more importantly, really specific actions in mind. Like what do they really need to invest in to absolutely to get to net zero? And obviously, we know with cities, that's not just investment in particular activities. There's also innovation around policy and technology, and how do cities engage with cities? How do cities engage with citizens? And that's why some of this chat's been really interesting as well. Like how do cities even bring citizens into the decisions that they're making? And so when it comes to CAD, and as Matt spoke to at the start, the entry point for the Global Covenant of Mayors for the cities activity database was actually through our research and innovation technical working group, when gosh, time flies, but maybe it was about 2 years ago when we were looking at, how do we as a research working group of the Global Covenant of Mayors, how do we understand the knowledge needs and the priority gaps in information that cities have? How do we understand that at a regional level, so that as a global organization, though, we're still providing city-specific information to really help drive and really help make those commitments a reality. And the work that Ironbark and the University of Melbourne through Paris, who's I think are going to speak shortly about some of that work, and Matt's already referred to the report, was really looking at really trying to get down into the regional level. And this is where the methodology that Ironbark developed and to look at cities' action plans, to interrogate the ideas that they've put into their reporting or into their strategies. How do we interrogate this and get the most information out there? But then, the important thing about CAD is then what's that feedback loop, and then how do we, bring on board a whole lot more information? How do we, provide a feedback loop to allow, cities to continue to learn, to continue to make better decisions, and to basically ratchet up their ambition as nations are being asked to do so through the Paris Agreement. And so it's really exciting from my perspective, with either my University of Melbourne hat or my GCOM hat on. It's a really exciting opportunity, and you spoke to about further opportunities for the city's activity database from an international or a regional perspective. And I think that working with city networks who have members either within Australia like CPP and globally as well through GCOM or other partners, I think getting out there and really understanding how cities could use CAD is the next opportunity. That's the next step, is really understanding that local context. I think I put that sticky note on the Miro board. It's that local context and the local scenarios where cities really want to make sure that the information that they're receiving is relevant to the context that they're making decisions in. So anyway, lots of great opportunities for CAD. And I look forward to continuing to explore this. And I'm really excited that CPP have taken on board the ground truthing and testing with their city networks. I think that's going to be an invaluable exercise that we'll hopefully then share with global networks as well.
Okay, well, terrific. That is actually, it's pretty exciting. We're really, really keen about getting more, value and sort of more momentum out of what's happening in the international community, and sort of taking the steps of working about how do you interpret that? How can you look at those numbers and feel like this is relevant to you as a city in Australia? So what I would like to do now is I'm just going to step into the results of the surveys that we ran. So I will just switch screens. So we'll step through the first one. So this survey here, we're talking about what factors get taken into account. There's a couple of clear winners here, which is always good to see. It helps us to sort of draw conclusions a bit more effectively. So the GHG, the greenhouse gas saving potential, is the top factor, which is terrific. It's obviously intuitively sensible, but also we do know that with program design and implementation, it can often be hard to be as focused on outcomes, in particular in an environment of where the actual greenhouse gas saving potential is a bit hard to come by right now. It's not a lot of really good, reliable sources for where to get that data from. But that appetite for that is terrific to see. The funding availability, not at all surprised to see that as a pretty important factor, but also we do see that they're getting a little bit more evidence-based, a little bit more numerical with the scale of investment, the scale of impact, the cost effectiveness. This will probably go to supporting the funding arguments as well. You'll be able to get sort of grounded a bit more in actual quantified outcomes. So that is really interesting. And then sort of going to the the more broader, the more open-ended question. So I've had a chance to take a flick through these, and we have got a really, really nice range of responses. But interestingly, there are some really consistent trends here. So like the issues around the reliability of data, like, of knowing what the potential impacts are from interventions, challenges around getting that data and feeling confident in that data, and some associated things such as the difficulties and challenges around monitoring and evaluation. That is absolutely a really, really consistent trend here, which is really cool. It's just great to see that this is one of the primary focuses. It's certainly something that we're hoping to be able to make inroads in, but it does sort of indicate that there is that serious appetite for getting more quantified, more objective, more standardized data about mitigation activities. Another one that comes out here is councillors' attitudes towards climate change, conservative nature of stakeholders. So this is, like a bit more of an intractable problem in some ways, but we definitely think, like, our position is that what is needed is to move away from more emotive-based arguments towards arguments that are more grounded in actual sort of, evidence-based practices, numbers from more, larger statistical groupings, more representation of activity and their outcomes, which could be used to sort of get a bit more of a hard-nosed discussion about the types of initiatives that should be pursued. So it may be the case that this actually does produce some valuable options there. But in regards to tools for affecting change, tools for progressing the conversation with all different stakeholders, that is something that we see as being really valuable. So I will go back to our presentation. And so that then wraps up our preliminary conversation sort of about these sort of options. And we're going to just delve into a couple of future scenarios just at the tail end of this session. So these, there are two scenarios here. So one is talking about researchers, and I'm going to be handing over to Dr. Paris Hadfield to walk through that. And then we'll be going a little bit into monitoring evaluation. So so I will just pass over to Paris. She has been extremely important in the development of some of the concepts and the ideas and some of the research materials that come out thus far. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how she wants to take this discussion. So Paris, are you happy to take over, and do you want me to stop sharing so that you can go to your discussion board?
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, happy for you to stop sharing. I was hoping for this part, because we don't have a lot of time, hoping to invite spoken contributions, comments, questions from the room. But just to first say, or I should say, I'm the postdoctoral research fellow at the Melbourne Centre for Cities of the University of Melbourne, and have been working, as Matt said, on this project for the last year and a bit. So in terms of future scenarios for the city's activities database, we've been thinking about how the CAD could be developed for local government as well as other stakeholders to use, exploring options for improved research engagement and integration. And of course, I come to this project as a researcher, and overall, we all recognise some of the key limitations and challenges associated with knowledge transfer between the academic research community and local government. And these things include practical accessibility, language, comparability, and relevance of insights, as well as timeliness, and not as well as the varying capacities of local government to procure or undertake research. In saying that, though, these ideas that we're developing around research engagement and new approaches would also build on the existing ways that cities are integrating research to understand climate problems and identify solutions, as well as the pilot testing and assessment of new technologies and processes. And these things are already being integrated by cities in their climate plans, which we found in our research that was highlighted earlier. Another important point is that institutional learning is a really critical part of mainstreaming social and technological innovations. And that's more of a conceptual framing that is, of course, important for this conference, the Innovative Cities Conference. So we would like to hear your ideas on what functions might be most useful for local government to drive knowledge transfer and collaboration between local government and the research community. So yes, Matt, if you'd like to share the slide with the questions, I'll also copy them into the chat. So the key questions are whether the CAD could first help to communicate local government priorities and capabilities for climate action to the research community. Secondly, could the CAD provide a useful framework for researchers to develop targeted communication of relevant research insights and evidence to better inform decision-making and policy implementation? And finally, could the CAD facilitate collaboration between local government and researchers on specific local knowledge gaps for policy design and implementation? And just at the end there, related to that point, whether it would be valuable through such collaborations to be able to broaden traditional scope of business case development or monitoring evaluation of pilot projects. And there I'm thinking of, you know, the diverse ways that researchers develop research insights, drawing on not only quantitative measures and complex modelling approaches, but also social research and engagement with stakeholders. So I'd invite anyone to raise their hands or unmute themselves to reflect on any of these points, whether it's about communicating your priorities to researchers, whether it's gaining better and more targeted communication from researchers, or indeed collaborating with researchers, which is something that I'm certainly keen to pursue as a researcher myself.
I'm interested. I don't know. I can see there's lots of people on this chat who are busy collecting a lot of the data that goes into the cities activities database. I mean, I'm interested in, is it help or what are the best mechanisms to connect the two communities of city practice and city research? And I know, Matt, this is a topic that you're particularly interested in. Yeah. I don't know if anyone here from Ironbark wants to jump in or others.
So I could make a comment to that, and just this is open for everyone, and please jump in with a comment or just unmute yourselves. But so one of the areas that we've been really interested in is looking at the process of knowledge transfer. So this is not looking at, say, the results of any one study or any piece of work where there's, say, a collaboration between cities and researchers, but to say, like, in general, how does this exchange work? So how does, like, an insight that's developed by a researcher, how is that accessed or referred to or interpreted by city practitioners, council staff? And for council initiatives, what is, like, the normal pathways or the general pathways that research community might look at and understand what is going on there? So we see a number of issues with the way this transfer occurs. And so, like, issues around, like, the timeframes that you know, that the research community or researchers we working to versus the needs of city staff, council staff. I guess the operational framework, so the things that city staff need to consider, and, you know, say the confidence of navigating research and saying, like, if we look at this, do we feel like it would actually, you know, accurately represent an outcome that we could achieve, or is it using different assumptions or different starting conditions? So there's a number of ways in which this is a bit difficult. And so we're thinking that by creating, like, a common place for information to be stored, potentially a number of a number of these barriers might be overcome or reduced. And so we might just see easier access and intercommunication. But if there are, particularly for any council staff who have either tried to or do use these kind of interactions, then or access research, then we're really keen. So for any insights. But so for this section here, apologies, Paris, we may need to wrap up in the near future so that we can just wrap out the session. But I'll pass over to you for any final comments you'd like to make.
I guess my only main comment would be that we're certainly thinking about what this might look like and how we might develop understanding and I guess ways of approaching these questions. So I'd very much like to hear from anyone after this session if they have particular ideas about this. So please do get in touch with Ironbark or us here at the Melbourne Centre for Cities. But yes, I'll happily pass back to you, Matt.
No worries. Well, yeah, so these are really interesting questions. And I think like if we manage to make some progress on this, we can really start to bring together some solid numbers. So moving beyond the researcher integration, there's some really interesting possibilities that come about through this sort of standardized approach by integrating emissions inventories and the data sets used to create emissions inventories and connecting them through to city activities, which allows for, like, sort of opens up the possibility of some very, very like interesting, standardized, very broad scale type monitoring and evaluation pathways. So we do know that monitoring and evaluation is has been like a bugbear of this sector forever, right? So monitoring and evaluating programs has classically been really, really costly, very hard to do, typically very difficult to get the budget to do it into programs. And like, it's just very complex. Like cities are very, very, complicated entities with lots of confounding factors, lots of things that can influence trajectories, and correcting for that is pretty tricky to do. So it means that we generally don't sit on a lot of quality evaluated data about how programs actually work. Like, so if a city does X, then what the outcomes of that will be in regards to emissions changes in the broader municipality. Better integration to the research community will be a really important step for helping to make this happen, but also creating pathways for more automated monitoring and evaluation will become extremely useful. So I do have a little pre-recorded session from Nicole Lombardo from the Google Environmental Insights Explorer team. They have been very proactive collaborators with Ironbark, with the snapshots, emissions inventory platform, and in integrating and collating data around action evaluations, and general city activities. So I'm going to just step into a presentation that they prepared for us, which talks to some of their visions and their attitudes towards how to, what might be possible for driving change in the sector.
Sorry, Matt, you might have to connect the sound.
Oh.
If you share your system sound as well, that should work.
Okay. So I will try.
I think it's in advanced sharing options. Yeah.
You can share. Sorry, everyone. I've made a mistake, unsurprisingly. So it's not coming up in my advanced sharing options. I might try. Oh, sorry. It's apologies, everyone.
Not sure how. Yeah, there's nothing that Eve can help, is there? With the sound, it's all through your computer, isn't it?
Can you see and hear it now? No?
Matt, I think there were other ways you could play it. Just
Yeah.
as a
I'll switch out. So what I'll do is, sorry guys, I'll just pause that and I'll switch out to an alternate way of presenting.
We only have 5 minutes left of the session, so I don't know whether Lex or Nat want to jump in with any closing remarks, and then we'll just literally close with Nicole's video.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. It's really, really important to have everyone here, and we're very keen to collaborate with everybody to find out how best we can help cities share knowledge between each other, and how that knowledge can be input from industry and research and community as well. So the CAD has a lot of potential, and we're really excited to share it and make sure we get the right functionality out of it that best works for everyone. So thank you very much. I'll pass back to Matt.
All right, I'm going to try this out. How are we doing? Anyone hear this? Can anyone?
No luck, Matt.
No luck? That's so annoying. I'm so sorry.
Nothing to apologise for. We have had, 18 months of Zoom and COVID online. These things happen.
But Matt, if it's a video, you could share a link to a file. Maybe we could share it in the Cities Power Partnership session tomorrow. Yes. Portia's nodding, I can see. It would be really, we could probably include it in there somehow, not knowing what's on the video, but just to make sure that we can share her views.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll make sure that becomes available. So to summarize, she was talking about the interesting possibilities that start to come about when you are able to get like some really nice granular local activity data and connect that through to initiatives being evaluated on by a city basis. And so really hoping that this could move us into a new place for like how cities might look at building on learnings and actually connecting through the outputs of programs. But that
stop sharing your screen.
Sorry, I will switch over now. So that is the conclusion of the presentation. So we're just wrapping up on some of those some of those really interesting future scenarios. Thank you so much for your inputs into the different questions that we're asking and some of the your discussion on some of the opportunities that exist in this space. We are very excited about what we might be able to achieve in this area. The collaborations with Innovative Cities and with the Cities Power Partnership. These are promising to be really quite powerful tools available to cities to be able to drive effective change. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate your time and your contributions. And please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have anything further to say about the matter. Okay, so.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.
Leave the meeting.